Welcome to the Velvet Armchair Mysteries. I'm Evelyn Ashford, and tonight we're stepping back into the fog of 1920s England for a tale that chilled even the great Hercule Poirot. Write Chapter 1 in 1,000 words without any extra line. Around him, porters shouted, trunks crashed, and somewhere a woman laughed too loudly at a joke that was not funny. Poirot disliked noise, he disliked disorder. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Introduction and Setup. The November fog clung to London like a guilty conscience, thick and yellow under the gas lamps of Victoria Station. It was the sort of fog that swallowed sound, turned footsteps into whispers, and made even the most honest man glance over his shoulder. From the first-class carriage of the Orient Express stepped a small, dapper figure who seemed entirely unaffected by the murk. His patent leather shoes gleamed despite the soot. His overcoat was cut with mathematical precision, and his moustache, that moustache, curled with the satisfied arrogance of a man who knew himself to be the finest detective in Europe. Hercule Poirot paused on the platform, drew a silk handkerchief from his cuff, and dabbed delicately at the corner of one eye, where a speck of soot had dared to settle. Around him, porters shouted, trunks crashed, and somewhere a woman laughed too loudly at a joke that was not funny. Poirot disliked noise. He disliked disorder. Above all, he disliked the English climate, which seemed designed specifically to ruin the crease in a gentleman's trousers. Yet here he was, summoned from the comforts of his Art Deco flat in Whitehaven Mansions, by a telegram that had arrived at precisely 3:17 a.m., slipped under his cabin door by a steward whose face Poirot had memorized for future reference. The message was brief, urgent, and written in a hand that trembled between fury and fear. Poirot had folded the telegram into exact quarters, placed it in his crocodile-skin wallet, and allowed himself one small sigh. The phrase, "from within," had ignited his little grey cells like a match in dry tinder. A room sealed for 35 years, breached from the inside. It was the sort of impossibility that made his moustache bristle with anticipation. Now, as a sleek Daimler purred to the curb, its chauffeur holding the door with the stiff correctness of a man who had once been in the Guards, Poirot permitted himself a moment of reflection. Blackthorn Grange. The name conjured images of ancient oaks, family curses, and secrets buried beneath flagstones. He had heard whispers of the estate in the clubs of St. James's, old money, older scandals, and a library that no one had entered since 1892. The drive west took them through suburbs that dissolved into hedgerows, then into a landscape of rolling fields silvered with frost. The fog thinned but never quite lifted, as if the countryside itself were complicit in whatever drama awaited. Poirot sat forward in his seat, gloved hands resting on the head of his malacca, cane, watching the world through eyes the colour of absinthe. At precisely 11:42 a.m., Poirot noted the time with satisfaction. The Daimler swept through wrought iron gates flanked by stone griffins. The drive curved between yew trees clipped into severe geometric shapes, their shadows sharp despite the diffuse light. Beyond lay Blackthorn Grange, a Tudor manor of honey-coloured stone, its chimneys exhaling thin plumes of smoke that hung motionless in the damp air. The house was larger than Poirot had expected, its wings sprawling like the arms of a drowning man. One wing, the west, was visibly darker, its windows shuttered, its very stones seeming to lean away from the rest. The chauffeur opened the door. Poirot stepped out, inhaling air that smelled of wood smoke, wet leaves, and something metallic he could not quite place. A liveried footman appeared as if conjured. took Poirot's valise without a word, and led him up steps flanked by urns overflowing with dead chrysanthemums. The entrance hall was a cavern of oak and shadows. A fire burned in a grate large enough to roast an ox, yet the warmth barely reached the centre of the room. Armour stood sentinel along the walls. A grandfather clock ticked with the solemnity of a judge passing sentence. Portraits glared down, men in ruffs, women in farthingales, all sharing the same hawkish nose and eyes that followed Poirot as he removed his hat. Lady Eleanor Blackthorne awaited him beneath a chandelier that had once illuminated the court of Charles II. She was tall, even-seated, her black bombazine dress absorbing what little light there was. Her hair was iron grey, drawn back so severely that it seemed to pull her features into a permanent expression of disapproval. Only her hands, long, pale, restless, betrayed agitation, twisting a lace handkerchief into knots. Monsieur Poirot. Her voice was low, cultivated, the accent of one who had never doubted her place in the world. You are punctual. I detest unpunctuality. Madame, punctuality is the politeness of kings. Poirot bowed with exquisite correctness. And of detectives. She did not smile. You have read my telegram. I have memorized it. Then you understand the gravity. The forbidden room. She broke off as footsteps echoed on the marble. Later. First, you must meet the others. They came one by one, summoned by the footman's discreet cough, each arrival accompanied by the rustle of fabric and the scent of their particular anxieties. Captain Marcus Blackthorne strode in first, a big man in a tweed jacket that strained across shoulders broadened by years of polo and big-game hunting. His face was weathered, his left leg dragged slightly. The legacy of a lioness in Savo, or so the gossip went. His eyes, the same winter pond grey as his aunt's, flicked over Poirot with the wariness of a soldier assessing an unknown officer. Detective, eh? His voice was a parade ground bark softened by whiskey. Heard of you. Solved that business on the Nile. What? Among others, Poirot murmured. Next came Miss Daphne Vale, slipping into the hall like a ghost in dove-grey wool. She was slight, almost fragile, with ash-blonde hair pinned in a loose knot that allowed tendrils to escape and curl about her face. Her eyes were the colour of rain on slate, and they avoided Poirot's with practised skill. Her fingers, he noted, were stained with indigo ink. Secretary's fingers, or perhaps an artist's. Lady Eleanor's companion, she said softly, as if the title explained everything. Her voice carried the faintest trace of an accent Poirot could not place. West Country, perhaps, or something more exotic. Dr. Felix Harrow followed, thin and angular, his black bag clutched like a talisman. His hair was slicked back with Macassar oil, his moustache trimmed to razor precision. He smelled of carbolic and something sweeter, violets perhaps. His eyes were pale blue, almost colourless, and they lingered on Daphne a fraction too long. Family physician, he said, offering a hand that was cold despite the fire. Been with the Blackthorns since before the war. Know every ache and secret in this house. Mrs. Greer entered next, the housekeeper, built like a Highland boulder in starched black bombazine. Her face was a map of loyalty and suspicion, her accent pure Glasgow. She carried a ring of keys that jangled like a jailer's chain. I've kept this house since Lady Eleanor was a girl, she announced to no one in particular, and I'll thank ye not to be traipsing mud on my floors. Last came Mr. Percival Finch, the solicitor, a small man who seemed to shrink inside his pinstripe suit. His pince-nez slipped continually down his nose, and he pushed them up with a gesture that had become nervous habit. His hands fluttered like trapped birds. "Finch, Finch and Finch," he squeaked. "Solicitors to the Blackthorn family for 3 generations. I was in London when it happened. Train records will confirm." Poirot surveyed them all, his gaze moving from face to face like a lighthouse beam. 6 people, 6 motives waiting to be uncovered. The fire crackled. Outside, a crow cawed once and was silent. Lady Eleanor rose. "The Forbidden Room is in the West Wing. No one has entered since my husband's death in 1892. The door was bricked up the same night. Last night," her voice caught. "Last night the bricks were smashed from within. The iron door stands open, and something priceless has been taken." She led them down a corridor lined with tapestries depicting unicorns impaled on lances. The air grew colder with each step. At the end stood the door, iron, studded, without handle or keyhole. Beyond it, a wall of bricks, now breached by a ragged hole, large enough for a man to crawl through. Poirot knelt, his knees protesting the damp flagstones. He peered into the darkness. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light from the corridor. The scent that reached him was old paper, candle wax, and something else, something sharp and metallic, like blood long dried. Chapter 2. The Crime Discovered. The house slept uneasily, as though aware that its oldest wound had been reopened. Poirot had been given the blue suite overlooking the rose garden, a room heavy with chintz and the ghosts of maiden aunts. He did not sleep. At 4:17 a.m. precisely, his pocket watch never lied, he rose, dressed in a silk dressing gown the colour of gunmetal, and slipped into the corridor. The grandfather clock in the hall had just chimed the quarter when a sound reached him. A soft, deliberate scraping, like a rat worrying at plaster. He followed it barefoot, his small feet making no sound on the turkey runner. The West Wing was forbidden to guests, yet the scraping came from there. A faint glow seeped beneath the iron door, the colour of candlelight seen through fog. Poirot's hand found the bolt. Cold, smooth, recently oiled. He slid it back with the gentleness of a safecracker and pushed. The door opened without a creak. Beyond lay darkness broken by a single lantern on the floor. The beam illuminated chaos. Bricks scattered like broken teeth, mortar dust thick as pollen, and in the centre of the wreckage a walnut desk whose drawers hung open like tongues. Papers, hundreds of them, lay strewn across the turkey carpet, some charred at the edges. The air smelled of smoke, lilac water, and fear. Poirot stepped inside. His shadow, elongated by the lantern, danced across bookshelves that rose to a ceiling, lost in shadow. He knelt beside the hole in the brickwork. The edges were jagged, the breaks fresh, flakes of mortar still clung to the iron doorframe. He ran a gloved finger along one brick. The blow had come from within the room. No question. Yet the iron door had been bolted from the corridor side. Mrs. Greer had demonstrated the mechanism herself at midnight, sliding the bar home with a clang that echoed like a prison gate. Impossible. He moved to the desk. A black leather ledger lay open, its pages torn out in savage diagonals. The remaining stubs bore indentations, a map, perhaps, or a list of figures. In the grate, ashes glowed faintly. Someone had burned paper within the last hour. Poirot pinched a fragment between thumb and forefinger. The paper was heavy, watermarked, bank stationery. Bearer bonds, unless he was much mistaken. Footsteps sounded behind him, heavy, uneven. Captain Marcus filled the doorway, a Webley revolver dangling from one hand, his face slack with sleep and whiskey. What the devil? He stopped, staring at the devastation. Aunt Eleanor said the room was sealed. How in blazes? From within, mon capitaine. Poirot's voice was soft, almost amused. The bricks were struck outward. Observe the angle of fracture. Marcus swore under his breath, "I'll rouse the house." "No." Poirot raised a hand. "First, we secure the guest scene. Then we wake Madame." They stood in silence while the lantern flame guttered. Somewhere in the walls, a pipe knocked once, like a warning. Lady Eleanor arrived wrapped in a dressing gown of burgundy velvet, her hair in a long iron plait down her back. The severity was gone. She looked suddenly old. Dr. Harrow followed, carrying his black bag. Daphne Vale hovered behind him, a shawl clutched to her throat. Mrs. Greer brought up the rear, keys jangling, her face set like a granite monument. Lady Eleanor's gaze swept the room and settled on the ledger. "It's gone," she whispered. "Everything." Poirot watched their faces. Shock, yes, but whose was genuine? Marcus's knuckles were white on the revolver. Daphne's eyes were wide, but her pupils were pinpricks. Had she taken laudanum? Harrow's hand trembled as he set down his bag. Only Mrs. Greer seemed unmoved, though her lips moved soundlessly, counting, perhaps, or praying. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "the bonds, how many?" £50,000, bearer bonds, my husband's insurance against ruin." She laughed, a brittle sound. "He hid them here the night he died. Said the room would protect them better than any bank. And the map, a plan of the safe concealed behind his portrait. I burned the only other copy years ago." Her eyes flicked to the grate. "Someone has been thorough." Poirot knelt again, this time beside the lantern. A smear of lilac scent lingered on the glass, Daphne's perfume unmistakable. He lifted the lantern and played its beam across the floor. Footprints in the dust, small, narrow, a woman's shoe. But also larger prints, booted, crossing and recrossing. And something else, a single pearl earring, glowing like a tiny moon against the dark wood. Lady Eleanor gasped. "That is mine. I lost it weeks ago." "Curious," Poirot murmured. "Lost in a room no one has entered for 35 years. Dawn was a pale rumour beyond the barred window when they gathered in the long gallery. Rain had begun, a soft, persistent drumming against the leaded panes. Poirot stood before the fire, hands clasped behind his back, and laid out the facts like cards in a game of patience. At midnight, Mrs. Greer locked the west wing and bolted this door. Captain Marcus was in the billiard room until 2. Mrs. Greer brought him whisky at 1:30. Miss Vale was heard typing in the east wing until at least 3. Dr. Harrow returned from the village at 4. He has a note from Mrs. McTavish confirming the time. Mr. Finch claims to have been in London. His train ticket is in my pocket. He held up the pasteboard stub. Purchased, yes, but the return portion is unused. Finch, summoned from his room still in carpet slippers, went the colour of putty. I changed my mind. Decided to stay the night at my club." "Convenient," Poirot said mildly. Outside, the rain intensified. A sudden scream shattered the huge tension, high, feminine, cut off abruptly. They ran. Daphne Vale lay sprawled in the rose garden, mud soaking her nightgown. A bruise blooming purple across her temple. In her clenched fist, a brass key, heavy, old, its bow fashioned into a serpent devouring its own tail. Dr. Harrow knelt beside her, fingers at her throat. "Pulse steady. Concussion, possibly. She's coming round." Daphne's eyes fluttered open. They were glassy, unfocused. "The room," she whispered. "He was in the room." Poirot crouched, the key cold in his palm. It did not fit the iron door. He had already tried. But it would fit something else, something hidden within the Forbidden Room's walls. Chapter 3. Investigation begins. Poirot did not pace. He revolved, a small, deliberate circle in the centre of the long gallery, hands clasped behind his back, eyes half closed, the very picture of a man listening to music only he could hear. The household watched him in silence, the way parishioners watch a priest before the elevation of the host. Rain hissed against the windows, the fire spat resinous sparks. At length he stopped, facing the tall windows that overlooked the sodden rose garden. "We begin with the impossible," he announced, "and we end with the truth. First, the room." He led them back to the west wing, Mrs. Greer unlocking the iron door with a key that trembled in her broad hand. The lantern had burned low, its beam carved tunnels through the dust-laden air. Poirot moved like a surgeon, pausing to lift a shard of brick, to sniff the ashes, to measure the angle of a footprint with the span of his hand. "The bricks," he said, "were struck with a mason's hammer. Observe the crescent marks, yet the hammer is not here. Curious." He opened a drawer in the walnut desk and withdrew a silver letter opener shaped like a dagger. This would not suffice. Someone brought a tool and removed it. Captain Marcus shifted his weight, the floorboard creaking beneath his boot. "The dumbwaiter," he said gruffly. "Uncle Reggie used it to send brandy up from the cellar when he worked late. Hatch is behind the shelves." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Show me." Marcus heaved aside a section of bookcases, false spines concealing a narrow shaft. The ropes were frayed but intact. The platform, large enough for a child or a very slim adult, rested at ankle height. Poirot shone the lantern downward. Scuff marks on the wood, fresh. Upward, a square of darkness leading to the old servants' corridor above the kitchens. "Access," Poirot murmured, without passing Mrs. Greer's locked door. But the bolt on the iron door, how was it replaced from the corridor side after the thief left? Dr. Harrow cleared his throat. "The bolt is a simple drop bar. A string through the keyhole, perhaps, weighted on the other side. Non." Poirot shook his head. "The keyhole is filled with rust. No string could pass. And the bar is heavy, iron, too heavy for such a trick." He knelt again, this time beside the portrait of Sir Reginald that hung above the empty safe. The frame was askew. When he righted it, a faint click sounded. The safe door swung open on oiled hinges. Inside, nothing but a moth-eaten velvet pouch and a scrap of paper. Poirot unfolded the scrap. A single line, in faded ink, "To my only daughter, forgive me." Lady Eleanor's breath caught. He had no daughter. "Officially," Poirot said softly. "Yet the bonds were meant for her, non? Insurance against the day she claimed her birthright." He pocketed the note and turned to the footprints. The smaller set, Daphne's, led from the dumbwaiter to the desk and back. The larger set crossed them at an angle, then vanished beneath the rug. Poirot lifted the rug. A trapdoor, flush with the floorboards, its ring concealed beneath centuries of polish. "Another entrance," he said. "This one from the wine cellar directly below. Mrs. Greer, your keys?" The housekeeper produced the ring with reluctance. The third key, brass, serpent-headed, fit the trapdoor perfectly. It opened onto stone steps, spiralling down into darkness. 2 ways in, Poirot counted, yet the door was bolted and the bricks intact until this morning. Therefore, the thief either remained inside or had an accomplice outside. He closed the trapdoor and stood. "Now, the attack on Mademoiselle Daphne. Dr. Harrow, your examination." Harrow opened his bag. Superficial bruising, no fracture. She was struck with a blunt object, possibly the brass key itself, used as a knuckle duster. Traces of belladonna in her bloodstream. Someone administered a mild sedative. "Self-administered?" Poirot asked. "Possible. The pupils were dilated equally." Daphne, pale but composed, sat wrapped in blankets in the morning room. "I remember nothing," she insisted, "only walking in the garden, then waking with the key in my hand." Poirot studied her. The bruise was theatrical, centered on the temple where a fall might naturally occur. Makeup, perhaps. He filed the thought away. He dismissed the others and requested the household's movements in writing. The responses arrived within the hour, each on monogrammed paper. Poirot compared the times. A gap between 3:30 and 4:45 a.m., the crucial hour when the bricks were smashed and the bonds removed. He visited the typewriter. The ribbon was indeed fresh, but the final page ended mid-sentence. A deliberate stop or an interruption. In the rose garden, he found the exact spot where Daphne had fallen. The mud was soft. Her body had left a clear imprint, on her back, arms flung wide. Yet the key had been clutched in her right hand, knuckles white. To fall backward while gripping an object so tightly would require conscious effort. He scraped mud from the key. Beneath the grime, a flake of dried blood, not Daphne's. Someone else had held this key recently and cut themselves. Back in the forbidden room, Poirot tested the dumbwaiter ropes. They bore the weight of a man easily. He climbed inside, lantern raised. Halfway up, his light caught something wedged between the shaft and the wall, a torn scrap of ledger paper. On it, in Sir Reginald's spidery hand, Poirot descended, the scrap burning in his pocket like a coal. The safe had been empty, yes, but the combination proved someone had opened it recently. And the blood on the key, whose? He summoned Mrs. Greer. "The wine cellar," he said. "Show me." The cellar was vast, its vaults marching into shadow. Bottles lay in racks like soldiers. At the foot of the spiral stairs, fresh footprints in the dust leading to a wooden crate. Inside the crate, a mason's hammer, its head crusted with mortar. And wrapped in oilcloth, a bundle of bearer bonds, $10,000 only, the rest still missing. Chapter 4. Clues and Red Herrings. Poirot stood alone in the wine cellar, the mason's hammer cold in his gloved hand. The bonds, £10,000 in crisp paper, lay on the crate like a dare. Someone had hidden them here, then fled upward at the sound of his approach. He wrapped the bundle in his handkerchief, tucked it inside his breast pocket, and climbed the spiral stairs. The dumbwaiter ropes still quivered. Whoever had listened was gone. In the forbidden room, he laid out his finds on the walnut desk. The hammer, the bonds, the torn ledger scrap with its combination, the blood-flecked key. He arranged them like pieces on a chessboard, then summoned the household one by one. The rain had stopped. A watery sun bled through the high window, turning dust motes into gold. Captain Marcus arrived first, smelling of gun oil and wet tweed. Poirot held up the hammer. "Yours?" Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Could be. I've a set in the gun room, but I haven't touched it in months." He took the hammer, turned it over. "This head's new. See the shine? Mine are pitted." Poirot nodded. Then someone borrowed it and returned the wrong one. Next, Dr. Harrow. Poirot offered the bonds. "Recognize these?" Harrow's fingers brushed the paper with professional detachment. "Bearer bonds, untraceable. Sir Reginald showed me the originals once. Said they were his get-out-of-hell-free card." He hesitated. "There's a watermark missing. These are forgeries, good ones, but forgeries." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "You are certain?" "Absolutely. The ink's too fresh, the paper too crisp. Someone printed these within the week." Mrs. Greer lumbered in, keys clashing. Poirot showed her the blood on the key. "Yours? I've a dozen serpent keys," she said stoutly. "That one's from the old smoking room, been missing since Michaelmas." She sniffed the blood flake. Iron and salt. Fresh. Poirot dismissed her and summoned Daphne. She moved like a sleepwalker, the bruise on her temple now a lurid purple. He laid the ledger scrap before her. Your father's handwriting? She stared. I never knew my father. Her voice cracked on the lie. Poirot watched her pupils. Yet you typed 42 pages last night. May I see them? She fetched the pages from her room. The final sheet ended, and so the serpent devours its tail. Beneath, in the margin, a doodle. The same serpent as on the key, drawn 47 times. Obsessive, Poirot murmured. Or a message. Mr. Finch arrived last, sweating despite the chill. Poirot produced the train ticket. You never used the return, Finch mopped his brow. I told you I stayed at my club. Your club porter says you left at 10 and never returned. Yet here you are. Poirot leaned close. Where were you between midnight and 4? Finch's pince-nez slipped. Walking, thinking, the fog. Fog does not leave brick dust on a man's cuffs. Poirot brushed Finch's sleeve. Grey powder drifted down. Finch went white. I tripped near the west wing, that's all. Poirot let him go, then performed his favourite trick. He accidentally dropped the forged bonds in the long gallery, pages fluttering like startled birds. Within minutes, each reaction filed away. That afternoon, Poirot explored the grounds. The rose garden yielded a second clue. A lilac-scented handkerchief snagged on a thorn. Initials F.H. embroidered in violet silk. Dr. Harrow's. Nearby, a footprint, small, Daphne's, leading toward the house, not away. She had walked to her attack, not from it. In the gun room, he found Marcus's hammer set, one missing. On the workbench, a pot of fresh mortar still damp. Someone had mixed it here, then carried it to the forbidden room. Evening brought fog again, thick as wool. Poirot gathered them in the library. A demonstration, he announced. He asked Marcus to brick up a section of fireplace using the mortar and a trowel from the gun room. Marcus worked swiftly, 20 minutes to lay 6 bricks solidly. Observe, Poirot said. In 20 minutes, a man may seal a hole. In 20 minutes, a murder may be concealed. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. You're saying someone is still inside? No, madame. I am saying the impossible is merely elaborate. He produced the real bonds, £40,000, found taped beneath the dumbwaiter platform. The forgeries had been a decoy. The thief had hidden the bulk and planted fakes to confuse pursuit. But who? Marcus demanded. Poirot smiled. The one who knew the combination, the one who bled on the key, the one who typed serpent 47 times. His gaze settled on Daphne. The one who rehearsed this crime for 35 years. Daphne swayed. You can't prove. I can prove the blood on the key is yours. Type O, rare. Dr. Harrow tested it this afternoon. Harrow nodded reluctantly. I can prove the handwriting on the ledger scrap matches your marginalia, and I can prove. He opened the trapdoor. Inside lay a child's patent leather shoe, size 2, monogrammed DV, that you entered this room as a child, through the dumbwaiter, to watch your father die. The room froze. Outside, an owl hooted once, mournful. Daphne laughed, a broken sound. He promised me everything, then sealed me out with his secrets. Poirot's voice was gentle. So you sealed him in with murder. Chapter 5. Complications and Twists. The revelation should have ended it. Instead, it cracked the house open like an egg. Daphne Vale stood trembling in the library doorway, the child's shoe dangling from her fingers as though it burned. Dr. Harrow's face had gone the colour of old parchment. His scalpel-steady hands now shook so violently that the forged bonds slipped from his grasp and scattered across the Persian rug like dead leaves. Poirot did not move. He simply watched, the way a cat watches a bird decide whether to fly. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "you will tell us the rest, or the police will." Daphne's laugh was thin, almost childish. "The rest? There is no rest, only the beginning." She dropped the shoe. It rolled to Poirot's feet and stopped against his gleaming spat. "I was 6 when he locked me in that room. Said it was a game. Hide and seek with Papa's secrets. He left me there until I screamed myself hoarse. Then he carried me out and swore I'd dreamed it. But I remembered the dumbwaiter. I remembered the smell of his cigars, and the way the bricks looked when the lantern swung. Lady Eleanor made a sound, half sob, half snarl, and took a step forward. Marcus caught her wrist. "Let her finish, Aunt." Daphne's eyes were glassy. "Every summer after that, I came back. Mrs. Greer let me in through the kitchen. I'd crawl up the shaft, sit in the dark and read his journals by candlelight. He wrote about me, called me his little mistake, promised the bonds would be mine when I turned 21. Then he died. Heart attack, they said, and the room was bricked up with his promise still inside. Dr. Harrow found his voice. She came to me 3 months ago, said she needed help to get what was hers. I thought, forgive me, Eleanor, I thought it was justice. Justice, Lady Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. You helped her rob me. I helped her survive, Harrow snapped. Reginald left debts that would have swallowed this estate. The bonds were the only clean money. Poirot raised a hand. Silence. The bonds are recovered, but there is another matter. He turned to Finch, who had been trying to edge toward the door. Monsieur Finch, you have been very quiet. Finch froze. I know nothing. You know the combination was changed. 18 to 2792 became 18 to 27 to 93 the night Sir Reginald died. You were his solicitor. You watched him do it. Poirot produced the scrap of ledger. Your ink, your pen, you forged the new combination to protect the family, then forgot to tell anyone. Finch's knees buckled. Mrs. Greer caught him by the collar and held him upright like a marionette. You slimy wee rat, she hissed. You let the lass think her father cut her out. Daphne lunged at Finch, nails raking his cheek. Marcus pulled her back. Blood beaded on Finch's skin, 3 perfect lines. Poirot sighed. Violence solves nothing, but it does leave evidence. He dabbed the blood with his handkerchief. Type O, like Mademoiselle's, curious. The room spun. Daphne stared at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. I didn't. You did, Poirot said gently. Last night, when you thought he would expose you. You struck him with the key, then staged your own attack to deflect suspicion. Harrow stepped forward. No, that was me. I hit her, lightly, to make it look real. She was supposed to find the key in the morning, play the victim. Daphne rounded on him. You promised we'd leave together. You said the bonds would buy us a new life. I lied, Harrow said simply. I needed the money to cover my own debts. Laudanum, gambling, you were the perfect distraction. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Outside, thunder rolled across the downs. Poirot moved to the fireplace and rang the bell. The footman appeared pale. Fetch the constable, Poirot said, and bring rope. While they waited, he reconstructed the night with merciless precision. But the body, Marcus said. Where is Finch? Poirot opened the dumbwaiter. The platform was empty, except for a dark stain and a single cufflink. They moved him after I found the decoy bonds. Panic. They hid him in the chapel crypt, accessible via the priest's hole behind the library panelling. He led them there. The crypt smelled of earth and candle wax. Finch lay beneath a pile of prayer cushions, the serpent key still clutched in his rigid hand. His skull was caved in on the left side, exactly where Daphne's bruise bloomed. Harrow laughed, a terrible sound. She killed him with the key, then used the wound to fake her own injury. Brilliant in a twisted way. Daphne sank to her knees. I didn't mean to. He said he'd tell. He said I was nothing but a bastard's mistake. Lady Eleanor knelt beside her, suddenly ancient. You were never a mistake, she whispered. Reginald begged me to find you. I refused. This is my sin, not yours. The constable arrived with 2 burly sergeants. Harrow went quietly, head high. Daphne fought, screaming about promises and serpents, until Mrs. Greer slapped her, once hard, the crack echoing like a gunshot. Poirot watched them led away. The rain had started again, soft and relentless. Marcus poured brandy with shaking hands. What happens to the estate? Poirot accepted a glass. The bonds are intact. The debts can be paid. Blackthorn Grange survives, scarred, but breathing. Chapter 6. The Revelation. The long gallery had never felt so small. Rain lashed the tall windows, turning the leaded panes into rivers of silver. Every candle in the house seemed to have been brought here. They stood in clusters on tables, mantels, even the floor, their flames trembling as if afraid to witness what was coming. The household, what remained of it, stood in a ragged semicircle. Lady Eleanor rigid in her high-backed chair, Marcus gripping the mantel until his knuckles blanched, Mrs. Greer planted like an oak between the door and her mistress, the 2 constables flanking the prisoners. Daphne Vale sat on a low stool, wrists bound with picture cord, her face streaked with tears, and Mrs. Greer's handprint. Dr. Harrow stood apart, coat unbuttoned, the laudanum tremor visible in his left eye. Poirot waited until the only sound was the rain. Then he began to walk, not his usual measured circle, but a slow, deliberate pacing that took him past each face in turn. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost conversational, yet it carried to the rafters. Mesdames et messieurs, we have chased shadows through this house for 3 days. Shadows cast by a crime so impossible it seemed supernatural. A room sealed for 35 years, breached from within. Bonds stolen, then half recovered. A woman attacked, by her own hand. A solicitor murdered, then hidden like a discarded toy. And through it all, the serpent key biting its tail. He stopped before Daphne. You, mademoiselle, are the serpent. She flinched but did not look away. Poirot turned to the room. Let us dispense with the lies and lay the truth bare step by step as one peels an onion. The tears are inevitable. He held up the child's patent leather shoe. 1893. Daphne Vale, age 6, is smuggled into Blackthorn Grange by a maid who pities the poor wee bastard. Sir Reginald, drunk on brandy and guilt, locks her in the West Library as a cruel jest. She discovers the dumbwaiter, hides there until he relents. The game becomes ritual. Every summer she returns, learning the room's secrets by heart. The safe, the combination, the weight of the bonds in her small hands. She believes they are her birthright. Lady Eleanor made a choked sound. Poirot inclined his head. Madame, you knew. You paid the maid to keep silent. You sealed the room not to bury your husband, but to bury the child he never acknowledged. He moved to Dr. Harrow. 1927. You treat Daphne for nerves after a miscarriage. Your child, doctor. She tells you the story. You see opportunity. The bonds could erase your debts, buy silence, fund a new life. You agree to help, but you are cautious. You create forgeries, excellent ones, to plant as decoys. You changed the safe combination to 18 to 27 to 93, the year of Daphne's birth, a private joke. Harrow's mouth twisted. She wanted poetry. I gave her precision. Poirot produced the mason's hammer. The night of the crime, 11:15 p.m. Daphne enters via dumbwaiter, wearing the child's shoe on her right foot. Sentimental, yes, but also to leave a smaller print. Confuse the timeline. She smashes the bricks outward. A task rehearsed since childhood. You, Doctor, follow through the wine cellar trapdoor with hammer, mortar, and trowel. Together you open the safe, remove the bonds. You leave 10,000 in forgeries in the cellar crate. Bait for whoever comes sniffing. He gestured to Marcus. Captain Blackthorne hears the noise, investigates, finds nothing because you have already bricked the hole. 19 minutes, as we demonstrated. You exit separately. Daphne through the rose garden, you through the priest's hole to the chapel. Marcus swore. I thought I heard rats. Poirot smiled thinly. Rats with laudanum breath. He turned to Finch's body, now laid on a library table beneath a dust sheet. Monsieur Finch. Poor, greedy Finch. He never left London that night. He hid in the stables, waiting to blackmail whoever emerged with the bonds. At 1:27 a.m., he confronts Daphne in the forbidden room. She panics, strikes him with the serpent key, once, to the temple. The blow kills him instantly. You, Doctor, arrive to find her hysterical. You help move the body to the dumbwaiter shaft, then seal the hole again. Daphne stages her attack in the garden, using Finch's blood to paint her bruise. The key, still warm from murder, is clutched in her fist as evidence. Mrs. Greer spat. And ye let the lass take the blame alone? Harrow shrugged. She was always the better liar. Poirot produced the typewriter ribbon. 47 serpents, not rage, counting. 47 bricks to remove, 47 to replace. She typed as she worked, timing the hammer blows to the carriage return. A metronome of murder. He faced Lady Eleanor. The final twist. You, madam, knew everything. You found Finch's body at dawn, moved it to the crypt yourself, to protect the family name. You burned the real ledger pages in the kitchen range, not the forbidden room grate. The ashes I examined were theatrical soot. Lady Eleanor's chin lifted. Reginald's sins would have ruined us all. I chose the lesser evil. Poirot's eyes were sad. There is no lesser evil, madame. Only truth, delayed. He signalled to the constables. Daphne rose without resistance, the fight gone. Harrow followed, humming a fragment of Chopin off-key, defiant. As they passed the portrait of Sir Reginald, Daphne paused. I only wanted what he promised, she whispered to the painted face. A name, a future. The portrait stared back, unmoved. Poirot watched them go, then turned to the survivors. The bonds are intact, the estate survives, but Blackthorn Grange will never be the same. Some doors, once opened, cannot be bricked up again. He raised his glass of untouched brandy to the rain-lashed windows. To forbidden rooms, he said softly, and the children who escaped them. Chapter 7. Justice Served. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean and trembling. Blackthorn Grange stood in pale November sunlight, its stones the colour of old bones, the yew trees dripping like mourners who had wept themselves dry. Hercule Poirot took his breakfast in the morning room. 2 croissants flown in from London, a single cup of chocolate so thick it coated the spoon, and the quiet satisfaction of a case concluded. He had not slept. The little grey cells required no rest when order had been restored. Lady Eleanor entered without ceremony, still in black bombazine, but with the severity softened by exhaustion. She carried a small leather portmanteau, and a look of someone who had spent the night burning papers and memories in equal measure. "Monsieur Poirot." Her voice was steady now, the crack gone. "The bonds are in the safe at Coutts. The forgeries have been destroyed. The estate's debts, Reginald's gambling, Marcus's Kenyan disasters, my own pride, are paid. Blackthorn Grange is solvent for the first time since the Boer War." Poirot inclined his head. "And the house itself will become a convalescent home for women. Nurses, widows, the war's forgotten. Daphne's name will be on the charter, whether she wishes it or not." She set the portmanteau on the table. "Her mother's jewels. I kept them hidden all these years. They belong to her now." Poirot opened the case. Inside lay a parure of sapphires and diamonds, the stones catching the light like trapped tears. "A legacy," he murmured, "and a penance." Mrs. Greer appeared in the doorway, apron crisp, keys silent for once. "The staff's been paid a year's wages, sir. I'm off to Dundee on the noon train. My sister's got a wee house by the Tay. I'll plant roses and forget this place ever had a west wing." Poirot rose and took her rough hand. "You kept the house's heart beating, madame. Roses will suit you." She snorted, but her eyes were wet. "Mind you write, you wee Belgian peacock. I'll expect postcards from them foreign parts." Captain Marcus was last. He had shaved, donned a clean tweed, and looked almost the soldier again. A cheque protruded from his breast pocket. Poirot's doing, a discreet arrangement with the bank to cover the Kenyan plantation's immediate needs. "I'm sailing on the Dunvegan Castle Friday," he said. "Back to the lions and the debts I can see. Aunt Eleanor's given me power of attorney for the estate's African holdings. Clean slate, thanks to you." Poirot waved away the thanks. "A man must have something to fight for, no? Lions are simpler than family." Marcus hesitated. "Daphne, will she hang? The Crown will plead manslaughter. Dr. Harrow will take the murder charge. Accessory, after the fact at minimum. Finch's death was panic, not premeditation. Daphne will serve 7 years, perhaps less. Harrow?" Poirot shrugged. "Laudanum and greed are harsh taskmasters." Marcus nodded, then surprised Poirot by offering his hand. "You're a rum little cuss, but you saved us from ourselves." Poirot's grip was firm. "Order must prevail, Capitaine, even in the jungle." The Daimler returned at 11, its chauffeur impassive. Poirot's valise was packed with military precision. 3 handkerchiefs, 1 novel, Mrs. Christie's latest, a gift from the author herself, and the serpent key, now wrapped in silk and tucked into a velvet pouch. He had no intention of returning it. Some trophies were earned. Lady Eleanor accompanied him to the steps. The griffins flanking the gate seemed less fierce in daylight. "You will not stay for luncheon?" "Alas, the Orient Express waits for no man, not even Poirot. But I leave you a final gift." He handed her a folded sheet of heavy cream paper. "The true ledger pages, Reginald's confession, the map, the combination. Burn them or frame them, as you choose. The past is yours to bury." She took the pages with reverence. "And the forbidden room?" "Let the builders come. Turn it into a library for the convalescent home. Books heal where bricks only hide." Mrs. Greer appeared one last time, a small parcel in her hands. "Seed cakes for the journey, and a dram of the good stuff, none of your froggy brandy." She pressed a flask into his pocket. "Slant math, monsieur." Poirot kissed her cheek, tasting salt and flour. "À votre santé, madame." The drive to the station was silent, the countryside unfolding in shades of wet green and gold. At Victoria, the Orient Express waited, brass gleaming, porters bustling. Poirot boarded, settled into his compartment, and allowed himself one small sigh of contentment as the train pulled away from the platform. In his pocket, the serpent key was warm against his heart. He drew it out, turned it over in the light. The metal was worn smooth by generations of Blackthorn hands, Reginald's, Daphne's, perhaps even the maid who had smuggled a child into a nightmare. He slipped it onto his watch chain, where it hung beside the tiny enamel egg he had carried since St. Petersburg. The English Channel slid beneath the carriage wheels, grey and restless. Poirot ordered cocoa from the steward, unfolded the Times and read the headlines without interest. His mind was already cataloguing the case. The 47 serpents, the 19-minute bricking, the child's shoe that had walked through time. At Calais, a telegram awaited. Poirot smiled, tucked the telegram into his wallet beside the first urgent message, and ordered a second cocoa. Outside, France unrolled in orderly vineyards and poplar-lined roads. Order, he thought, was the true luxury. Justice was merely its shadow. Back in England, the west wing of Blackthorn Grange stood open to the sky. Workmen had removed the iron door, chipped away the bricks, and carried in shelves of bright new books, Dickens, Austen, the Brontes, a complete set of Agatha Christie. Sunlight poured through the high window, where once only dust had danced. In the rose garden, the first crocus pushed through the mud, purple as a bruise that had finally healed. And somewhere on the Orient Express, Hercule Poirot raised his cup to the rhythm of the rails. "To forbidden rooms," he murmured, "and the doors we choose to open." Chapter 8. Echoes in the Walls. The Orient Express cut through the night like a silver needle through black silk. Poirot sat alone in his compartment, the serpent key glinting on his watch chain beneath the dimmed lamp. The rhythm of the wheels had lulled him into that half-dream state where the little grey cells worked without conscious direction. He was replaying the case, not for triumph. He had tasted enough of that, but for the small nagging dissonance that always remained when a puzzle seemed too neatly solved. A soft knock. The steward entered with a silver tray, cocoa, 2 madeleines, and a telegram on thick cream paper. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Telegrams at midnight were rarely social. "West wing fire. Room gutted. Come at once. E. Blackthorn." The madeleines cooled untouched. Poirot dressed swiftly, grey suit, black overcoat, the Malacca cane, and by Dover he had secured a cabin on the night ferry. The channel was mercifully calm, the stars sharp as cut glass. He stood on deck, wind whipping his moustache, and felt the old thrill. The case was not closed after all. Blackthorn Grange greeted him at dawn, smoke still curling from the west wing like a question mark. Lady Eleanor waited on the steps, wrapped in a man's dressing gown, her face streaked with soot and something fiercer, relief perhaps, or defiance. "You came," she said simply. "Madame, a fire in a room bricked up for 35 years? It is what you English call too much of a coincidence." He followed her inside. The forbidden room was a ruin. Charred beams sagged like broken ribs. The walnut desk had collapsed into itself, papers reduced to black lace. The high window had shattered outward, glass glittering on the lawn below. Workmen stood about, caps in hand, while Marcus directed the pumping of water from the ornamental fountain. Poirot knelt among the ashes. The safe hung open, its contents empty velvet pouches, a child's drawing of a serpent, curled and black. But something else caught his eye. A brass mechanism half melted into the floorboards, wires leading to the dumbwaiter shaft. "A timing device," he murmured, "set to ignite hours after we left." Marcus joined him, face grim. "Found this in the chapel crypt." He held out a scorched journal, its leather cover blistered. Finch's. He wasn't dead when they bricked him up. Poirot took the journal with reverence. The final entries were scratched in frantic pencil. 1:27 a.m. Confronted D in library. She struck me. Key to temple, not fatal, Harrow. Arrived, bound me, gagged me with my own tie. Said they'd let the room take care of me. Bricked the hole while I still breathed, air thin, writing by matchlight. If anyone finds this, tell my wife I tried to do right. The bonds are... The entry ended in a smear of blood. Poirot closed the journal. Finch was alive when the hole was sealed. Murder, not manslaughter, and the fire to destroy evidence. Lady Eleanor's voice was steel. Daphne and Harrow are in Holloway awaiting trial. How? An accomplice. Poirot's eyes swept the room. Someone who knew the timing device, who could enter the West Wing unseen. Mrs. Greer emerged from the shadows, a bundle in her arms. This came for ye, sir. Postmarked Dundee, but the handwriting's local. She handed over a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Poirot unwrapped it carefully. Inside, a second serpent key, identical to the first, and a single sheet of paper. You solved the wrong crime, monsieur. The bonds were never the prize. Look to the East Wing. A friend. Marcus swore. The East Wing. That's Daphne's typewriter room. They ran. The east corridor was untouched by fire, the air thick with the scent of ink and lilac. Daphne's typewriter sat on its rosewood desk, cover in place. Poirot lifted the cover. Beneath the platen, the missing £40,000 in bearer bonds, neatly stacked, and a photograph. Sir Reginald Young, arm around a laughing woman who was unmistakably Daphne's mother. On the back, in Reginald's hand, to my true heir. The room was a decoy. The East Wing holds the future. Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor. Your husband planned this. The forbidden room was a blind, sealed to draw attention while the real fortune stayed hidden in plain sight. Marcus laughed, a harsh bark. The old fox. He knew we'd brick up his shame and never look elsewhere. But Poirot was already moving. He opened the desk drawer. Inside, a false bottom, and beneath it, a reel of copper wire and a small clockwork mechanism, identical to the one in the ashes. The fire was meant to destroy the West Wing after we found the East Wing cache, he said. A double bluff, but someone interrupted the timing. Mrs. Greer cleared her throat. I might have knocked the clockwork askew when I was dusting yesterday. Thought it was a broken music box. Poirot kissed her soundly on both cheeks. Madam, you have saved a fortune and possibly lives. The bonds were returned to the bank. Finch's journal ensured Daphne and Harrow faced murder charges. The timing device linked them to arson. Lady Eleanor added a codicil to the Convalescent Homes Charter, a scholarship in Finch's name for solicitors' widows. Weeks later, Poirot received a final parcel at Whitehaven Mansions. Inside, a tiny enamel serpent, its tail in its mouth, and a note in Mrs. Greer's careful copperplate. Chapter 9. The Serpent's Confession. The trial opened on a February morning in 1928, the Old Bailey cloaked in fog so dense the gas lamps stayed lit until noon. Poirot arrived early, his overcoat buttoned to the throat, the serpent key now a discreet charm on his watch chain. He took his seat in the public gallery beside Lady Eleanor, who wore unrelieved black and the expression of a woman attending her own funeral. Daphne Vale and Dr. Felix Harrow stood in the dock, separated by a burly warder. Daphne had lost the brittle gloss of the country house. Prison pallor made her eyes enormous. Her hair a dull ash blonde scraped into a knot. Harrow looked thinner, the laudanum tremor replaced by a nervous tic at the corner of his mouth. They did not glance at each other. The prosecution laid out the case with brutal efficiency. The breached room, the forged bonds, Finch's journal, the timing device, the fire. The jury, 12 sober citizens in wool and worry, followed every word. When the photograph of Sir Reginald and Daphne's mother was passed among them, a collective intake of breath hissed through the court. Poirot listened, noting the small omissions. No mention of the East Wing cash. No mention of the second serpent key. Lady Eleanor's hand rested on his sleeve. Her fingers were ice. The surprise came on the third day. Daphne rose unbidden, ignoring her barrister's frantic gestures. "I wish to change my plea," she said, voice clear, almost amused. "Guilty to everything except the murder of Percival Finch." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel until the sound cracked like gunfire. Harrow stared at her as if she had sprouted wings, eh? Silence fell. Daphne continued, addressing the jury directly. "Dr. Harrow killed Finch. I helped brick up the hole. Yes. I staged the attack on myself. Yes. But the blow that ended Finch's life was Harrow's. He used my key after I dropped it in panic." Harrow lunged across the dock, only the warder's grip restraining him. "Liar! You struck him! You were hysterical! Order!" The judge's voice cut like a blade. Poirot leaned forward. The little grey cells hummed. This was the dissonance he had felt on the train, the note that refused to resolve. Daphne smiled. "A small, terrible thing. I have proof." She nodded to her barrister, who produced a sealed envelope. Finch's cufflink, found in Harrow's medical bag during the search of his rooms. Blood and hair on the mother of pearl. My blood type is O. Finch's was AB. The hair is dark. Finch's. Mine is blonde. The courtroom buzzed again. Harrow's face drained to chalk. The cufflink was passed to the jury. The forensic expert confirmed. The blood and hair matched Finch. The angle of impact consistent with a right-handed blow from above. Harrow's height, not Daphne's. Lady Eleanor's grip tightened. "She's sacrificing herself to save him," she whispered. "Why?" Poirot's eyes never left Daphne. "No, madam, she is sacrificing him to save herself." The final piece arrived that afternoon, delivered to Poirot's hotel by a boy in a ragged cap. A single sheet of prison notepaper smuggled out in a loaf of bread. "You were right about the East Wing, monsieur. The bonds were always there. Father's last joke on the family that rejected us. I moved them the night of the fire, after Mrs. Greer knocked the timer askew. Harrow never knew. He thought we were partners. I let him believe it until the end. Tell Lady Eleanor the sapphires are hers to sell. The convalescent home will have its nursery. And tell Marcus the Kenyon plantation is safe. Finch's blackmail notes are in the rose garden under the sundial. I was never the serpent. I was the tail, biting to be free." Poirot folded the note with care. The trial concluded the next day. Harrow was convicted of murder and arson, Daphne of accessory after the fact and theft. Sentences: death for him, 10 years for her. The judge cited extenuating circumstances of paternal abandonment in her case, a phrase that made the newspapers for weeks. Outside the Old Bailey, snow began to fall. Soft and deliberate. Poirot stood beneath the portico, watching the flakes settle on his gloves like tiny white lies. Lady Eleanor joined him. She planned it all, she said wonderingly, even the confession. From the age of 6, Poirot agreed, a child locked in a room learns patience and revenge. They walked together to the waiting Daimler. Marcus was already inside, a cable from Mombasa in his hand. Debts cleared, plantation thriving. He looked up as they entered. Finch's notes were where she said, "The sundial, burned them myself." He hesitated. "She asked me to visit her, in Holloway." Poirot settled back against the leather. "Visit we, but do not expect gratitude. Mademoiselle Daphne has her freedom in 10 years. She will not waste it on regrets." The car pulled away from the curb. Snow blurred the city into anonymity. Poirot drew the serpent key from his pocket, turned it over once, then dropped it into the Thames as they crossed Blackfriars Bridge. The river swallowed it without a sound. Chapter 10. The Garden After the Storm. Spring arrived at Blackthorn Grange, the way a shy guest finally steps into the drawing-room. Tentative, then all at once. By April, the west wing had been gutted and rebuilt, its charred beams replaced by pale oak. The forbidden room transformed into a sunlit nursery, where infants' cries mingled with the cooing of doves. The iron door was gone, melted down into garden trellises. The bricks became a path through the rose garden. Only the high window remained, now flung open to let in the scent of lilac and new earth. Lady Eleanor walked that path every morning, leaning lightly on Marcus's arm. The sapphires had sold for a fortune. The convalescent home was fully staffed. Its first mothers, war widows, factory girls, women the world had tried to forget, already rocking cradles beneath the portrait of Sir Reginald, which now hung in the entrance hall with a discreet brass plaque. He built walls. We build futures. Mrs. Greer had not gone to Dundee after all. The roses she planted along the old west wall had taken root with ferocious enthusiasm, their canes heavy with buds the colour of fresh blood. She stood among them now, secateurs in hand, snipping spent blooms with the precision of a surgeon. "You'll want to see this, monsieur," she called, as Poirot's Daimler crunched up the gravel. "They're blooming early." Poirot stepped out, hat in hand. The April sun warm on his balding pate. He had come unannounced, a courtesy call before boarding the Simplon Orient for Venice. The serpent key was gone, but its absence felt like a missing tooth, noticeable only when he smiled. Mrs. Greer led him to the sundial at the garden's heart. Beneath it, in a tin box lined with oilcloth, lay Daphne's final gift, a child's exercise book, its cover warped by damp. Inside, in careful copperplate, were 47 pages, 47 serpents, yes, but also a confession, a map, and a will. To whoever finds this, the bonds in the East Wing were real. The forgeries were Harrow's. I let him believe we were equals, because a woman alone is dismissed. A woman with a doctor is feared. Finch died because he threatened to expose me before I was ready. I struck the first blow. Panic, not murder. Harrow finished it, thinking to bind me to him with guilt. I let him. Guilt is a leash. I held the other end. The fire was my signal. Mrs. Greer's accident with the timer gave me the hours I needed to move the bonds, plant the journal, and write this. Lady Eleanor, the sapphires are yours. Sell them. Build. Marcus. The plantation is yours. The blackmail notes are ash. Mrs. Greer, the roses are yours. They bloom where blood was spilled. Monsieur Poirot, the serpent was never the key. It was the circle, beginning and end in one bite. Thank you for teaching me to break it. I will serve my 10 years. When I walk free, I will plant a garden of my own. No walls, no secrets. Poirot closed the book. A single rose petal, crimson and perfect, had been pressed between the final pages. Lady Eleanor read it in silence, then folded it into her pocket. She was always his daughter, she said, cunning as a fox, stubborn as the Grange itself. Marcus kicked at the sundial. 10 years. She'll be 38 when she's out. Plenty of time to start over. Mrs. Greer snorted. She'll need a husband who likes thorns. I'll send her cuttings. They walked the new path together, past the nursery window where a nurse lifted a baby to wave chubby fists at the sky. Poirot paused, watching the child's face. Round, innocent, utterly unaware of the ghosts that had funded its cradle. Order, he murmured, and chaos. They dance, no? But sometimes the music changes. Lady Eleanor pressed a small packet into his hand. From the nursery, for your journey. Inside, a single rosebud, still tight, and a card in Mrs. Greer's hand. Plant this in Venice. Let it remind you that even forbidden rooms can grow something beautiful. The Daimler waited. Poirot boarded, the rosebud cradled in his handkerchief. As the car pulled away, he looked back once. The Grange stood golden in the sun, its chimneys straight, its windows open. Mrs. Greer was already pruning again, Marcus laughing at something she said, Lady Eleanor scattering seed for the doves. At Victoria, Poirot bought a first-class ticket and a pot of earth from a flower seller. He boarded the Orient Express, settled the rosebud in its new home, and watched England slide away beyond the glass. In Venice, he would plant it beside the Grand Canal, where the water reflected the sky and secrets dissolved with the tide. Some cases, he reflected, ended not with a verdict, but with a garden. The train gathered speed. Poirot raised an imaginary glass to the window.